Welcome to the Sister Street Show with Mary Nunley and Sharon and I, interactive show and virtual playground where we explore topics around entrepreneurship, online and in-person events, and the games that can be played with all of it. We invite you on our journey of sisterhood discovery and trial and error in the adventures of online entrepreneurship.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of the 2022 season of the Sister Street Show. So, we're not exactly on week 2 of the new year, but this is episode 2 of our new show. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, I am one of your co-hosts, Mary Nunley, and I have my fabulous co-host, Sharon Odegura here. I'm going to give her grace for a moment because she and I are both having some throat lozenge challenges at the moment. And so my lozenge is smaller than her lozenge, so I'm talking first. Anyway, last week, if you missed the show, we were just talking about some of our favorite books, what we learned in 2021, and what our vision is for the Sister Street show and the Sister Street franchise, for lack of a better term, for 2022. And we've decided that 2022 is the year of the entrepreneur. So today we're going to be talking about something you may or may not have heard, which is the Great Resignation. And we're going to come at it from two different perspectives. I'm going to be approaching it from an economic business perspective, and then Sharon's going to be approaching it from a more holistic spiritual wellness perspective. And as you get to know the two of us, you'll see how that fits in. So, by profession, I am an instructional designer and a gamification strategist, and Sharon is a wellness coach, business entrepreneur, and holistic lifestyle type of person. And so we try to be true to ourselves in our show as well. Sharon, are you able to speak?
I am able to speak for the
All
moment.
right.
Yes, and exactly what Mary says, we think it's a right partnership for you. And if not, then there's other shows for you to watch. But we do believe that this can contribute to everyone to have a holistic picture of their business and their lifestyle, without which you're going to feel like something's missing. You're doing a lot of work, but perhaps you're not feeling as fulfilled as you want to, or you're healing the world and you're draining your bank dry as well, your bank account. So there's a way to be holistic, we believe. And that's why we feel and enjoy this partnership and bringing that to the table for you to consider, to test, to play, to try on for yourself and your business.
I love it. So let me start off with the Great Resignation. This has been making the news now for several months. And for those of you who may be tuning in a couple years in the future because things live on YouTube forever, or have just decided not to look at the news ever, the Great Resignation has been happening in the US and around the world, but we're going to focus specifically on the US for several months now. And as a result of the COVID pandemic, what we're finding and what economists are finding is that people are quitting their jobs in droves. And I was just reading an article this morning that said that people that are mid career and people that are in technology and healthcare seem to be leading this change. And for many, many years, we've been taught that working from home is just not possible. How could you be productive if you're not physically sitting in an office, if you're not at your desk where your coworkers can come and ask you a question, your manager can watch what you're doing? It's just not feasible. And what happened as a result of the COVID pandemic is that many knowledge work positions, information positions, call center style positions discovered that, you know what? People can work from home. They're actually more productive and they're happier. Now, there's also some CEOs and stuff that are like, no, no, this is a fluke. It can't be. And I think for me, the challenge is having worked remote with my own business now for over 4 years and having colleagues and clients around the globe. It is possible to work remotely if you have specific standards and set your expectations and have a plan. That's not to say that every position on the planet can work from home. We're not there yet. We still need people to physically go out and farm. We still need the healthcare workers in the hospital to perform surgeries and take care of us. We still need grocery workers to stock the shelves. So I'm not saying that there's that piece, but what I am saying is that even in those positions, we need to pay people better. This is my soapbox, but also treat them as humans, because just because you're in a low paying job doesn't mean that you don't have skills, talents, and aspirations. And that to me is really what the Great Resignation is all about, is treat me as the person that I am worth, not as just a dollar sign on your, accounting software. So off
Yes,
of my
Mary.
soapbox, Sharon, over to you.
No, and it's such an important thing to consider, right? So even if you're watching this in the future, and especially if you're watching this now, we want to bring awareness to this situation that's happening, because it gives us the opportunity to have that clarity, to have that awareness. Now, things like corporate offices just shutting down for good. There are places in America that the city center is pretty much completely empty, because a lot of teams and a lot of companies are going partially or fully remote. There's places here in Phoenix where I live where the corporate office has shut down completely, so everyone is remote. Now consider that if a business that you're partnering with has gone completely remote, there might be some impacts to the communication that's available, the collaboration, the speed, because people are going to work differently off-site than on-site. At the same time, in your organization, if things are going remote or coming back live in person, you've got to consider what is the changes that have happened in that person's lifestyle if they're coming back into the office. And also, if you're going remote, how do you keep that culture alive and the communication as consistent? Because you're not going to have those interactions in the hallway where you're going to keep up with the small pieces of information. It's a lot harder to stay in connection. So what other tools like Slack, like emails, like phone calls, do you need to make sure are being invested in so that they're just as consistent? But this
Exactly.
great resignation is something that is happening, and so it is affecting all of us in one way or another. And we've noticed that with supply chains. We perhaps have noticed that in our communication with any company that we're working with, or certain places that are just not there anymore.
Yeah, and that's the other piece of it, is that as more companies are opting to remove their large office presence, there's also a negative financial impact to the community, because those restaurants and those shops that relied on all of these people converging to this office building don't have that. So there's pros and cons, and it really needs to be thought through. But there's also a mindset shift. So and Sharon's going to talk a little bit about this from a more global perspective, or universal perspective, but there's this mindset shift also about how do I know that somebody's doing the work? What level of control is needed? Because for the longest time, many managers, not all, felt like in order to know what you were doing, they had to, you had to physically be in front of them so they could see every action, like, oh, you're 5 minutes late from break. What's going on here? Instead of treating people like adults and saying, here's the ramifications. Okay, 5 minutes late one time, that's one thing. But you were 5 minutes late, which made you late for the meeting, which was a very important client call. So now the client's upset. So it's like, how do you manage those expectations? And again, we're not here to provide necessarily answers, but we'd like you to think about both the positives and the negatives. And this applies to your business too. If you hire somebody, what are the pros, but what are the drawbacks? Are you hiring the right person? Are you bringing on that right client? So, Sharon, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the more spiritual, global, universal trends that are also happening with this great resignation?
Absolutely. So you may have heard, everyone, about this concept, or may not, that comes from a school of thought called human design. Human design takes from astrology and also a little bit of, for me, what I like to say is personality testing. Now, I'm not a human design expert, but what I love about the human design system is that it gives us tangible ways to understand how people are presenting themselves in their subconscious and conscious motivations and energies. And so in the human design system, there's a prediction, and this not is only in the school of thought of human design, but other spiritual schools of thought, that in 2027, there is going to be a shift in the planetary cycles. Now, Mary and I do believe that things happen in cycles. You have heard as well that history repeats itself. And so this is one of those 300-year cycles that will be shifting in 2027, whereby this sense of infrastructure and tribe, believing in following the leader, believing in giving your full trust into one system, paradigm, school of thought, is going to be shifting, and the focus is going to be more on individual motivations. You might have seen this in how everyone is mission driven, how everyone wants to be heard and seen and recognized. And so some of these things of how the infrastructure is breaking down is part of what the human design school believes is this shift. Whether you believe it or not, it's something to consider on if team, the definition of team is going to be shifting to this team as an individual. How do we acknowledge each individual contributor in a team and make sure that they are seen and heard, that their role is just as important as the role of the boss or leader? How is that going to impact the culture as people are deciding that they don't like the way they're being treated, or they don't like the role that they have, and how can they be individually fulfilled?
I love it.
So,
And we're starting to see this happening already in companies, but I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. And if you look at it again from a political standpoint, and I'm not talking about like red, blue, whatever, but just watching the analysts and listening, reading what they're talking about. It's like, this year we're going to see more people on the individual spectrum. This year we're going to see more people doing this. This is what we're projecting. This is what we're seeing. And we won't know until 2027 and beyond get here. But, just keep your eyes open. Look at those shifts. Look and see what things are changing and how
yeah,
they're
and
changing for you.
absolutely. And Mary, when people say, well, I'm not sure if I believe in all that woo stuff, we have come to the point in our society where we acknowledge that on the full moon, things happen, right? Because we are creatures primarily made up of water. And we know that gravity pulls water in different directions. The tides move in and out. So the full moon pulls that magnetic field in our bodies, and our tides rise on the full moon. How do we know this? Because it's acknowledged in the news that during the full moon, crime is higher. There's a little bit more chaos in the world. Similarly, when this planetary cycle is happening, something is happening. And so how do we acknowledge and how do we feel that? And one flip of the coin on that too, that I'd like for you to consider is, as an employee, if you are considering of resigning or what work, to take the time to be thoughtful around it, and also to be compassionate that your leader is also a human and is also feeling the same urges. So opening up the lines of communication and
Yes.
having that conversation of what your needs are, having the clarity of what's important to you, offering that to your leader might just change things unexpectedly, because they might not be aware that they are doing what they're doing, or that they're just following, mindlessly the system, that there is this shift for you and hopefully for them as well.
And Sharon, to follow up with that too, I've been an employee, I've been a leader, a manager, whatever you want to call it. I've been in both roles. And as a manager, I still had a boss. And as a business owner, my clients are my bosses. And so to go along with that, when you're having that conversation, also have a plan. So here's what I'm feeling, or here's what I'm thinking, here's what I would like to have changed. And then also offer a solution like, I don't want to work on Sundays. I come from the hospitality industry. Sundays, we almost always worked. Okay. Is it I don't want to, or I can't? Because some people can't because of religious obligations or family obligations. But then offer a solution. Sharon, I can't work on Sundays. That's the only day that my nurse is not able to come to stay with my sick parents. I have to be there to take care of them. But I could work a double shift on Saturday. And Susie said that she would cover my shift on Sunday. Can I do that? Now, your manager still might say no because there's other things you don't see, but at least you came with a problem, offered a solution, and showed that you're willing to be flexible. And I think that's a piece that a lot of people miss too. It's like, I'm not going to work on Sundays. I quit. That's very different than I can't or I won't, but here's my solution instead.
Yes, absolutely. A book recommendation book drop here is Mike Abrashoff's It's Not Your Ship, or It's Your Ship. And Mike Abrashoff was a captain in the Navy. And one great example, Mary, was that he talked to his team and they said, well, you have all the power, you're the boss. And he said, look, I'm a monkey just like you on the monkey tree. You're on the lower rungs of the tree. So when the leader looks down, all they see is bright smiling faces looking back up at them. But I'm looking down, or excuse me, but as an employee, you're looking up and all you see is a bunch of assholes. He said at the same time, he's not at the top of the monkey tree. So he also has his rungs that he needs to look up and down with, right? So it is based on your perspective. At the
Mhm.
same time, we have to acknowledge where we are and where our leaders are. And sometimes when they say no, it's not because they don't believe or agree. It's because of where they are and all the different factors and control that they may or may not have.
Yes, and
So,
that is something I used to tell my team when I led teams. It's like, look, you might think that I'm doing this because I don't want to, but there are times when I was given confidential information that I couldn't share about something that was happening, whether it was layoffs or expansion or whatever, and I couldn't tell that to my team. So all I could do was say, "No, we can't do that right now."
yeah, yeah. But know your table stakes, because as a leader as well, Mary and I have both thrown down and said, we will not cross this line, or we also will resign. So it's
Mhm.
important for every single person to take full responsibility of what they cannot control, and try to give the grace in the system while also understanding with their clarity whether that company is or is not the right thing. And that's the difference, I think, right now, is that there is the sense of choice, right? So Mary, you were going to tell us a little bit more of that from an economic perspective of what's going on with this resignation and people's belief and knowledge that now they have a choice.
Yeah, so one of the things that's been really fascinating to me with this great resignation is that there's you see all these signs about people are quitting their jobs, there's all these open jobs, and I was just reading something the other day that said when people were offering $30 an hour for a job, there was no problem with people staying in their job. When they were offering $20 an hour, there was no problem. At $15 an hour, there were some openings, but for the most part, they were able to fill those jobs. But at the under $10 an hour jobs, that's where all those openings are. And a lot of that is also tied in economically to the fact that prices have increased over 10% from last year. Medicine has increased, healthcare has increased, internet has increased. So we have all of these increases, but if you're still making $7.25 an hour, and that hasn't shifted in a decade, you can't afford in some cases, you can't afford to work. And so that's the other piece of it is if you pay people more, the counter argument from some folks is like, well, if we pay them more, then we're going to raise all these prices and then people are going to go out of business. But what they're finding is when they pay people more, prices may increase slightly, but there's more money coming into the economy. And so you're actually benefiting. And I am not an economist by any stretch of the imagination, but there are benefits when you pay people more, they're more apt to spend the money on non-necessities. So you're putting more into the economy. And then again, not to go down the political pathway, but that whole issue of the multi-billionaires and stuff avoiding paying taxes or using the loopholes to their advantage. There are some real benefits to applying the tax codes across the board consistently to everyone, much like they did in the 1940s.
Yes. So lots to consider on where you are, what's going on, and what you want to do about it. our role, Marion and mine, is to bring forward this concept so that you can start to dissect and digest it and decide, how does this affect your business as a business owner? How are you going to look at your business structure and see
Mhm.
what is and is not working? Are your team at their best capacity? And should you increase wages, or should you understand and put more efforts in recruiting? But really to know that something is happening, and how does that affect you? And then as the employee, being communicative, sharing what your needs are and why will help in your role and for all of your colleagues, so that the leader knows what's going on.
Yes.
Mary, what is our sort of message from this week with the Great Resignation?
So our message is, first of all, have a plan. Know what it is that you want and know where it is that you want to go. And I think the other part of our message is be kind, which, I've changed this a little bit since we chatted before the show, but really listening, be kind to yourself and be kind to the other people around you, because we're all kind of struggling with this right now and we're all walking our own paths. But if we don't have a plan, we're just going to keep hopping from one bad experience to another, versus have a plan, know where you want to be, and treat yourself nicely as well.
Absolutely. And so tips for you guys on that plan: do things like a wage survey. Make sure that you are paying the right fair wage for your industry, because if you haven't done a wage survey in the last 6 months, you are probably off base by a little bit. So make sure you do that wage survey. Do a team member survey so that you understand your team's engagement level. And this is, of course, for the business owner, but making sure that you know what are their biggest complaints. Sometimes it's going to be an unexpected thing. People will stay at a job if there is the right snacks or the right soft serve ice cream, versus the job that pays $1 or two more but doesn't have the right culture, the right support, the right fun environment. So, and that's a true life story, that people quit because the soft serve ice cream was taken away. So make sure
Uh-huh.
you're doing those wage surveys, make sure you're doing those engagement surveys, and then having those one-to-one conversations, both from an employee to boss perspective and a business owner to your employees, because the communication is going to be the most important factor, as Mary said, with kindness, because we don't know what's going on in people's lives now, but we do know that there is more than there has been ever before.
Yes. And the last thing is, if you're managing remote teams, find ways to check in. Use Slack, use Skype, use Microsoft Teams, use whatever tool you want. Don't make it where the employee feels like, oh my gosh, I always have to be responding. But set up a channel where they can chit chat and have that water cooler talk and talk about the big football game, or the, tennis match, or the snow that's coming. Like, if you're watching this live here in Nashville, we're supposed to get 6 to 8 inches of snow this
Whew.
weekend, which would be January 15th and 16th. This is the South. I mean, that's normal where I grew up in Chicago. You don't get 6 inches of snow in Nashville twice in the same month. So that's a big topic of conversation right now. So it's like with my team, I sent out a message going, okay, guys, make sure you get to the grocery store. The roads are supposed to be slick. Be safe. Don't worry, because your internet or your power might go out. It's okay. Just send me a text so I know that you're okay. So little things like that, when you're managing a remote team, can also make a difference.
Absolutely. Lots more to come on tips and tricks. We will also drop some additional tips and resources, because this is something that we feel that everyone should be talking about. And anything that we can do to help, always drop us a comment, share your thoughts in the chat so that we can follow up. And of course, visit us at sisterstreet.show, sisterstreet.show, so you can see the show notes and all the resources we have to offer.
I love it. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for future videos.